Hello everyone, and welcome to this installment of Operation Parenthood. My name is Olivia Ferris and I'm a County Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences Education. Today we're going to be talking about developmental growth for children ages 3 to 6 months. Okay, and the 4 types of growth we're going to be discussing are physical, social, emotional, and intellectual. Before we begin, one thing I really want to stress is that just because your infant is not developing exactly the way that's laid out in this presentation does not mean that there's something wrong necessarily. So make sure you talk to a physician, family doctor, pediatrician before making any kind of changes or assumptions. So first we're going to be discussing 3 months, what the child may be doing physically. So they'll be able to lift their head when held at your shoulder, lift head and chest when lying on his or her stomach. If a child's wanting to play and they're laying on their stomach, that's really good. It's something we call tummy time. It helps them kind of develop that, initiative to kind of lift their body. And this even is like a prerequisite to crawling, is beginning to lift theirself, and even a prerequisite to walking. They can follow moving objects or a person with their eyes. So if they see something they find interesting, like a bright color or a light, they're going to start to watch that object and check it out with their eyes and really just start observing and absorbing things in order to have growth. They're going to grasp a rattle when it's given to them. They're not going to necessarily hold it using the tips of their fingers or holding it like you would an ink pen or something of that nature. That's really complex. This is going to be basically a grasp where they're just grabbing. They're going to be using a lot of their palm, and it's not going to be shaken just for the idea of play necessarily, but more of experimentation and learning. They wiggle and kick their arms and legs at this stage. So social. So this point at 3 months, they're going to be making cooing and gurgling sounds and a lot of noises. They're going to try to repeat sounds when adults imitate them. Depending on what language the infant is growing up around, the primary language, that's going to determine and dictate some of those sounds that they're even making at this stage. They're going to smile at familiar adults, and they're going to smile when smiled at. And then they're going to welcome familiar adults by waving arms and legs and wiggling their body and getting really excited. So this is, them starting to show preference for adults that they trust. Like, this is the very beginning stages. So emotionally, by 3 months, they can communicate hunger, discomfort, or fear by using facial expressions and crying. So at this stage, they're not able to say, I am sad or I'm sad because, but instead they're going to be crying or, just looking really like making a sour face, and they're upset or in distress of some kind or discomfort. So it's really important to make sure that you're looking at the body language of the infant. They become quiet and interested at familiar sounds. So when they hear a familiar sound, they're going to start to pay attention to it, and this includes familiar voices or just something they've heard a lot. And they're going to react with delight at peekaboo games. So actually at this stage, children don't really have something what we call object permanence, which is where when we can't see an object, like let's say it's put into a drawer, we know it's still there, it's still in the drawer, it still exists. But at this stage of development, babies really don't understand that. So they get really excited during peekaboo games because it kind of looks as though the person who's playing peekaboo with them is appearing and disappearing. So until they've established that object permanence, it's kind of like a magic trick when we play peekaboo games, and they get really excited with that, especially with a familiar adult or sound or face. So intellectually, by 3 months, the child should be able to turn their head toward bright colors, bright lights, and voices they find pleasing, or just any voice. If they hear a sound, they're going to want to investigate and, start absorbing some of that and learning. They're going to respond to shaking of rattles or bells, body movements, and they're going to have an interested facial expression. So they're going to start to become more curious, and you're going to be able to note that. And then they're going to change some of their reflexes into purposeful movements. Okay, so things that were initially just a reflex when they were born, like maybe their hand kind of moving or something, that's going to become more purposeful, like sucking or rooting. When they grab an object, rather, it's going to be for a purpose. So, purposeful movement. I want this item, I'm going to grab it, or I want to hold it, like, is going to take the place of I'm just kind of moving and it's not really for a reason. I'm just moving to move, or I'm just trying to experiment with my limbs. So now it's going to become something with more, not really a goal attached, but more of purpose. By 6 months, there's going to be some physical changes. So now they can hold their head up steady when setting with help. So we're going to see, from a baby trying to move their head back and forth or kind of lift up from a tummy position, they can actually hold their head up steady with some help. They can roll over, and that's kind of the big one here, is the child actually being able to physically roll over, because this is kind of a pre-stage to crawling and, eventually walking. Can reach and grasp for objects. So here's where the reaching comes more into play. So a little bit ago we said, they have purposeful movement. Well, now in addition to this grasping with purposeful movement, they're going to reach with purposeful movement. And they're going to play with their toes. You can see the child in this picture is kind of sucking on their toe and kind of investigating their limbs and hands, and they're going to explore things by mouthing or banging objects. So, this is a really good point to make about making sure that your house or apartment or whatever residence you may live in, that it is child-proof and that things are off the floor that could harm a baby, especially if it's put into their mouth, because this is a stage where they're going to become more mobile. They're starting to roll around and move some more, and it's just something to be aware of. And then they also are going to be able to move toys from one hand to the other. So again, this is more established purposeful movement. They're going to be moving it from one hand to another, either to investigate or maybe to even start to initiate some play. So socially, they're going to be babbling, and they're going to make some language-like sounds. So, again, depending on what language that is primary in the child's house, this can even affect these sounds again. But these sounds are going to actually start to sound like what I would say like syllables of words a little bit, not quite there, but almost. So closer than what they were 3 months ago. And then they're going to show a preference for familiar adults, especially adults they trust. They're going to really gravitate toward them more. And they're going to start to be more cautious around strangers at the same time. So kind of more aware of, the difference between an adult they know and an adult they don't know. And then they're going to start to notice the presence of other babies, kind of like in the photo, kind of checking each other out. They acknowledge that there's another baby, and they really can tell that there's a difference. They're going to hold up arms as a sign to be held. So if they want to be picked up, this is where they're going to start reaching. Again, we're talking about the reaching and the holding up of arms, and again, more established purposeful movement. So emotionally, at 6 months, they're going to laugh, squeal with delight, cry and scream loudly if anything is annoying or frustrating to them. So they're not really using words. They're not necessarily going to say, oh, I'm sad, but you're going to know by body language and by different noises and different cries and different sounds they're making. And then they're going to start to smile at themselves in the mirror, and they'll show anger if prevented from having something they want, such as a desired toy. If they really want something, they may even start to cry or show frustration. And then they're going to, again, be weary or cautious of strangers at this point. So at 6 months, intellectually, they may start to imitate familiar actions. So if they've seen an adult do something several times, they may try to start imitating that. If accidentally makes a mobile or toy move in a new way, can try to repeat this movement. So your baby, they might have rolled a car across the table or open and close something, and this is where they're starting to investigate. So they might say, oh, we're opening and closing, or that was really cool, let me try that again. So they might not necessarily be able to accomplish this, but they will try to repeat it. Even if it's not necessarily able to be done, there will be an attempt. And then they'll observe their own hands and feet. So again, earlier we talked about kind of bringing the feet to the mouth. But here, instead of just kind of putting their hands and feet in their mouth, they're going to look at them. They're going to start to observe. So this is just another sensory use of learning that they're going to do. And then they're going to explore objects by banging them or putting them in their mouth. And again, make sure you're watching what's on the floor, because usually what's on the floor, especially at the 6-month point where they're able to be even more mobile, they're more likely to put it in their mouth because they're more easily able to get to it. And then they're able to anticipate your feeding by opening mouth. So this might be more of instead of just crying because they're hungry, there's more of like a communication here to explain exactly why they're upset. Okay, so in summary, the 4 types of development we've talked about for 3 to 6 months is physical, social, emotional, and intellectual. So by 3 months, they may be able to lift their head when held at the shoulder. They're going to smile at familiar adults and smile when smiled at. They're going to communicate hunger, discomfort, or fear, really basic emotions. They're going to use their facial expressions. They're going to cry. And then their reflexes, and this is something I really want to point out, is some of their reflexes are going to turn into a purposeful movement, such as sucking, rooting, or grasping. So again, it's going to go from just kind of moving to moving because I want to do this, or moving because I've noticed this. So it's going to be more purposeful. By 6 months, they may be able to roll over, and this is the beginning stages of beginning to crawl and eventually walk. They're going to notice the presence of other babies. They're going to cry or scream loudly if annoyed or frustrated. So again, they're not at that stage yet where they're telling you they're upset, but you're going to be able to note that due to the crying and screaming. And then they're going to explore objects by banging them and putting them in their mouth. So they're going to really start to try to figure out, what is this? What does it do? What can I do with it? So they're really going to try to start experimenting and absorbing some of that observed information. Okay, so thank you for watching this video today. If you have any questions at all, you can contact me or your local county extension office if there's something in this video you'd like more information about. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.